Welcome back, guys. Today's story is titled The Warrior Leader, and it is the story of the Battle of Jericho. What's happening in this story is that the Israelites, who used to be slaves in Egypt, God did all that crazy stuff by bringing the plagues and everything, took them out of Egypt, took them through the Red Sea that he split, and the Israelites have been wandering in the desert for years and years. God has brought them to the land he promised them. There's one thing in the way, is Jericho. And God always wins his battles. So Jericho is going down. So here's the story. After Moses died, God gave his people a new leader. His name was Joshua, which means the Lord saves. Joshua was going to lead God's people into the special land God had promised to give them. By this time, God's people have been wandering around in that baking desert for 40 years. So you can imagine how sick they were of sand and anything yellow and tense and rocking and being hot. And how happy they were to reach the edge of the desert and to see their beautiful new home right there in front of them, all cool and green and lovely. There was only one problem: Jericho. Jericho was a city, but it wasn't just any old city. It was a fortress, and it stopped anyone from getting into the land. The people looked at Jericho, at the big, giant, scary walls all around it, at the tall, towering ramparts, at the heavy iron gates bolted shut, at each other. What would they do? No one knew, but God knew. And God told Joshua what to do. But Joshua must have looked surprised, because it was a very odd battle plan indeed, as we'll soon find out. Then God made his people a promise. I will always be with you. I will never, ever leave you. If you do what I say, you trust me and obey me, your lives in the new land will be happy and everything will go well. So Joshua gathered his army together. They had their swords and spears and shields, and they were ready to fight, but the plan wasn't about fighting. It was about trusting God and doing what he said. Joshua's army went marching, marching, marching around the city, day after day. They're too scared to fight, the people in Jericho said. But they were wrong. God's people weren't scared. They were waiting for God to tell them what to do next. On the seventh day, God told his people to march around the city, not once, but 7 times. And then God told everyone to make as much noise as they possibly could. Has anyone ever told you to make as much noise as you possibly can? Well, imagine that noise, add 3,999 more people making that noise too, and you get the idea. Ear splitting. And, as it turned out, stone splitting too. Because the huge, strong walls of Jericho just crumbled to the ground as if they were made of sand. Jericho vanished in a great cloud of dust. So it was that God's people entered into their new home. And they didn't have to walk, and they didn't have to fight to get in. They only had to walk. Joshua said, God has brought you safely here. Now will you do what he says? Because the Israelites were constantly disobeying God, and it never worked out well for them. Hopefully things will be different now. Everyone said, we promise. Only God can make your heart happy, Joshua said. So don't pray to other pretend gods. Only pray to the real, one, true, living God. No, they said, never. We would never do that. I'm afraid they didn't keep their promise. They didn't do what God said. And many years later, just as God warned them, things would go badly for God's people. They would lose their home again. Enemies would capture them and take them off as slaves. And God's people would scatter into many different lands. But God's plan was still working. One day, he would give his people another leader and another home. But this home, no one could ever take away from them. And that leader was Jesus. And that home is heaven. See, the Israelites, they did this. They would trust God, and then they would stop obeying him. And they would obey him, and they would stop obeying him. Back and forth, up and down. And that never worked out for them. Every time they walked away from God, God would say, okay, you're on your own. And then bad things would happen to them. And they would go, please, God, save us. And God would always come back and save them and reunite them. And that is what Jesus is for us, too. Whenever we walk away from Jesus, stop trusting him, stop obeying him, things are not going to work out. But Jesus is always there, always ready for us to say, God, I messed up. Please forgive me. Please help me to do good again. And Jesus always listens to his people, will always return and help pick us back up and continue on our way. Thank you, Jesus. You're an awesome dude. See you guys tomorrow.